start tonight, though, with news from the game Monopoly, where big changes are afoot.
They're taking the jail out of the Monopoly game.
Yeah, yes. You heard right. The game designed to teach children how capitalism works has removed the go-to-jail option to reflect the financial system they're going to grow up in, presumably replacing it with a get yelled at by Congress and then go directly to the Cayman Islands option. Also though, this week, we actually have news from the real financial sector. Wall Street's darling has worked out that there is gold in that there aluminum.
The New York Times reporting over the weekend that Goldman Sachs is running a scheme to artificially inflate aluminum prices.
So Goldman Sachs is running the classic Reynolds Wrap grift on the American people.
The report claims Goldman's Metro warehouse in Detroit creates bottlenecks. Aluminum users say this lengthens delivery times, contributing to higher prices. As for the banks, they profit from those extended rents and from bets made on the futures of those metals by their trading arms.
Now, you might be thinking, surely there is a rule in place to prevent aluminum hoarding. Well, relax, because there actually is. The rules state that 3,000 tons must leave the warehouse each day. However, that leaves a loophole big enough to drive several aluminum-laden trucks through.
And on a daily basis, a fleet of trucks moves the aluminum around and around from one warehouse to another.
I've got to say, now that you think about it, the new version of Monopoly is actually perfect. You just move pieces of metal around and around in a circle, collecting money whenever you want, and it's guaranteed that nobody is going to jail.
You know, it's so good to see him. He's starting to get graphics floating around on the internet with his quotes.
I think he's going to be groomed for the new seat there.
Yeah, you think so?
I think Jon Stewart may leave, yeah.
Well, either that or they just expand again. You got the Colbert Report came out of it. I think he should get his own show.
I think he should, too.
Of course, we are here for you. We're independent media. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
Right now, we're talking about banks and the monetary system, so we're going to run a clip just like this.
Might we have justice at long last? JP Morgan had to report, for legal reasons, that they are under investigation by the Department of Justice for mortgage securities fraud related to the mortgage securities that led to the 2008 financial crisis. Wow. After all these years, the Department of Justice finally waking up and going, oh, right, what caused that gigantic crash? Fraud. Massive amounts of it. So we'll see if they mean business here, but it is a federal criminal investigation. The bankers aren't going to jail, right? But the bank itself could have criminal prosecution. So we'll see how it turns out. It is good news. Now, to give you a sense of the trouble that JP Morgan is in, here's all the different categories that JP Morgan is being investigated for. Inflated aluminum prices, mortgage-backed securities like we just told you about. Another case involving mortgage foreclosures. LIBOR, which is a massive interest rate rigging scandal. JP Morgan also involved in that. And MF Global. And energy manipulation. Look at that enormous list. And these are the most respected businessmen of the country. Corporate titans. Leaders of the world. No, the best way to rob a bank is to run a bank. And that's exactly what JP Morgan is doing. I hope someone at some point holds them accountable. That is a long laundry list of possible crimes.
So I can't believe it. Look at the list.
Oh, it's just a small list, though. You know, they're all doing it.
If you look at the HSBC, yes, the HSBC got their hands spanked for laundering drug money.
But they paid a fine. So nothing to see here. Move along.
Yes, nothing to see here. No bankers need go to jail. We've taken that right out of Monopoly.
But it's all the big banks that are under investigation. I mean, and it's not just...
Not all of them. Not Goldman Sachs.
You have the Wall Street starlings.
Another former Wall Street employee is paying the price for his involvement with the 2008 financial crisis. On Thursday, a federal jury in New York found former Goldman Sachs trader Fabrice Tour, nicknamed Fabulous Fab, liable for misleading investors prior to the crisis. Since it's a civil case and not a criminal one, he was found liable, not guilty, for 6 of the 7 charges of securities law violation against him.
Federal regulators accused Tour of selling investors subprime mortgages he knew would fail. The Securities and Exchange Commission Commission says those toxic mortgages help make millions for Goldman.
More specifically, Fox Business reports Tour lied to investors about a product that he claimed would increase in value when he knew it would collapse. That collapse cost investors at least $1 billion. Tour also became known for an email he sent to a former girlfriend where he openly acknowledged his actions. The verdict was seen as a victory for the SEC, which has been largely criticized for taking little action against Wall Street after the crisis. But before the SEC can pat itself on the back, the New York Times points out Tour isn't exactly a big catch. Some critics have questioned why the agency chose to make Mr. Tour, a mid-level employee who was stationed in the bowels of Goldman's mortgage machine, the face of the crisis. Rather than take aim at a high-flying executive, the agency pursued someone barely known on Wall Street, let alone Main Street. But the ruling may not be entirely symbolic. Business Week reports the jury's verdict could help other Goldman Sachs customers prove wrongdoing in their lawsuits. And a writer for the Huffington Post hopes the impact of the trial goes even further. No one at any bank has gone to jail, nor even to a criminal trial for actions that led to the crisis. Here's hoping the Tour verdict doesn't end up being the government's crowning achievement in the wake of the crisis. Tour will face thousands of dollars in fines and could be banned from the securities industry. For Newsy, I'm Candace Avilés.
So all that's totally for real.
And it's total fraud.
Yes. Okay. They just make stuff up and they just sort of go with it and say, oh, okay. And then they bankrupt the world.
Exactly.
Okay. So why they haven't now, if you take a look at it, the best analogy for 2008 was Goldman Sachs stole a $150,000 car. They paid a $5,000 fine and they got to keep the car.
Yeah.
Okay, now that makes sense. And now
nobody goes to jail.
This guy, who's one of the key members, faces thousands of dollars in fines when he makes millions of dollars per day.
Well, he's kind of a small fry.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
you
well.
know, but I mean, no one's gone to jail then. This guy's not going to jail. It was a civil case.
But now another civil case has come up. The whole American government is suing the Bank of America.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's check this out.
The U.S. government is suing Bank of America for allegedly lying about the risks involved with its mortgage-backed securities worth $850 million. According to the court filings, it happened back in January 2008, so I guess at the beginning of the financial crisis. Bank of America did warn about this. It said last week that it has been informed about these lawsuits, but in a statement they said that those products were sold to sophisticated investors who had sufficient information and that the bank wasn't responsible for the housing market collapse and for that caused mortgage loans to default. So Bank of America, this is not the first time that it's been sued by the U.S. government either. It has had a number of settlements with investors as well as the U.S. government over the last few years.
America's suing the Bank of America.
That's just un-American.
It's just kind of ironic. Maybe they'll change the name.
Remember, the Council for Policy Alternatives revealed the fact that we bailed out our banks, the Bank of Montreal and the CIBC, right here in Canada to the tune of $3,400 per citizen, or for more money than those banks were worth.
But I saw a report in the paper yesterday that our rating agency said the Canadian banks are okay.
Well, that was the official news again.
Yeah.
As if, I mean, could you please get someone credible to give us this information? J.P. Morgan is one of those huge, huge bank things, okay? So, and...
Jamie Dimon, IMF Global.
Okay, so do your research on who we're talking about, but these are two clips that, yes?
They explain a few things.
J.P. Morgan Chase, the nation's biggest bank by some measures, agreed to pay $410 million to federal energy regulators to settle charges that its traders manipulated electricity markets in California and the Middle West. Traders allegedly used improper bidding strategies that forced overpayments by the local agencies running power grids in those areas. Now, the bank did not admit any wrongdoing as part of the settlement, and none of the traders involved will face sanctions or criminal charges.
Once a darling of Wall Street, these days J.P. Morgan Chase's reputation is tarnished. The latest in a series of scandals, two former employees are accused of trying to cover up last year's $6.2 billion derivatives trading loss. Javier Martin Artajo and Julian Grout have been charged in both criminal and civil court with falsifying documents and wire fraud. Bruno Ixel, the trader known as the London Whale who actually ran up the losses, is not being charged in exchange for his testimony in the case. The full knowledge of the losses came to light in April of 2012, highlighting the bank's risk-taking with its own and customers' money. Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan Chase's CEO, famously dug himself into a hole by calling reports of the giant loss a tempest in a teapot. He was given a rough ride by a Senate committee that concluded JP Morgan Chase hid massive losses, disregarded risk, and tried to downplay its own failure after the scandal first became public. An activity critics say that should never have been allowed to happen while the firm was engaged in commercial banking.
The criminal case against these two traders is just one of a series of ongoing probes against JP Morgan by both federal and state authorities. Regulators with the Securities and Exchange Commission are also reportedly seeking a settlement with the firm over the London Whale case that could involve an admission of guilt as well as steep fines. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, New York.
Okay, so
there may be criminal charges at some point, perhaps.
Maybe. Why do they waffle around on these white-collar things? These guys bankrupted the world by lying.
Isn't wire fraud a RICO charge?
Now you're starting to make sense here. Please do your research on the way things are working. LIBOR, L-I-B-O-R, is one of the most important rates that there are on the planet. They lied about that.
They're setting foreign exchange rates.
They take bribes from countries so the country gets a better credit rating. Okay, and we put these guys in charge because they say, well, this is the only way we can do it.
And then they'll come out and they'll rate a country's credit, but I guess what, they didn't get enough bribe money?
Yes, and it's an actual problem. We've got it. We're talking about fiat money systems coming up in the next segment right here. We want you to hang on for that because there's a reason why they lie and get away with it. And it's kind of weird, okay?
Let it be so.
Yes, let it be so. But we are pointing you towards the Municipal Sustainability Project. We dropped off a letter to the mayor of Kelowna talking about the way that we want to get oil and big money out of the food production system and start putting people to work. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
Please stay tuned while we bring you Walter Gray's reaction and a whole nother segment on the banking industry.
You mean the banksters?
Yes. Banksters are us. Well, banksters are them. Independent media is us. And at least we're enjoying it. Kind of like, I love coming to work when it's working out like this.
Yeah, me too.
Stay tuned. More on the banksters coming up. This is Radio Free Canada.
A lot of people think poverty is a problem for other people in other neighborhoods. But even if you or no one you know is ever affected by poverty, not doing anything about poverty is costing us all. British Columbia has the highest poverty rate in Canada. Not addressing this comes at a price. And this is what it looks like when we do the math. For starters, it costs us $1.2 billion per year to pay for the healthcare costs related to poverty. We've heard a lot lately about how we need to get tough on crime. But some crime could be prevented by reducing poverty, which is linked to crimes of desperation, low literacy rates, and living in unsafe situations. The poverty-related costs of crime in BC add up to $745 million per year. Then, there's the income that the poor might have earned from working if they had access to better supports and training, or the income that the working poor could have earned if their jobs paid better wages. This is also a loss to our economy, to the collective wealth of our society. And it adds up to as much as $7.3 billion per year. Altogether, it works out to between $8 and $9 billion every year. This is a terrible deal. And the worst part of this is that it would cost us between $3 and $4 billion per year to put an effective poverty reduction plan in place. That's less than half of what poverty is costing us now. You don't have to be an economist to see that it costs more to keep people in poverty than it does to fix the problem. It's just simple math. Not for other people in other neighborhoods, but for all of us.